Okay, so my name is Henk Huizer. I'm at QUT. This is TELedvisors Special Interest Group Webinar, Educational Technology, Student Equity, and the Role of Third Space Professionals. And I will just introduce Dr. Anita Wheeldon, who has experienced university life as both a professional staff member and an academic program director at UniSQ. Her thesis was finalized in 2022 with the title, and I love this, the title, The Destruction of Academic Life, How Managerialism Colonizes Universities with Symbolic Violence. There's a strong title. So, Anita, are you all ready?
I absolutely am. I'll start sharing my screen. Thank you for that smashing introduction, Hank. Yes, it was quite a day when I had to cross the stage in front of the Vice-Chancellor and the Chancellor having the name of my thesis read out. But a very proud day because I'm very proud of the work that I have done, and I believe it to be really important. So before just getting started, I am coming here from Jagera and Yagara country as well, also known as Toowoomba, and it's a very bleak and mountainous wintry day here today, hence why we're all rugged up. So yeah, I've started life in my university career as a senior professional manager, and I have effectively jumped the fence now into academic life. So I definitely have a lived experience of a comparable lived experience of being a professional staff member and a academic. And I'm hoping today that this presentation will perhaps offer an alternative or extend a view of AMOS's work as to why there is a contended space in universities, and why the themes that AMOS has spoken about, decision-making, agency, homogenization, surveillance, centralization, and efficiency, exist in our university, and why they are actually, in fact, problematic. And the reason they are problematic is because we currently are in a managerialized university environment. Now, we talk about managerialism a lot in universities, and we also talk about neoliberalism a lot in universities. And I thought it might be just a little bit handy just to quickly set the scene and just to ground us in what we are actually talking about here, because the two concepts are different concepts. So neoliberalism is also about economics and free market competition, capitalism, deregulation, and minimizing state intervention into economic and state affairs. Whereas managerialism, which is what we're talking about today, could be considered neoliberalism's sister, if you like, sidekick, because managerialism is about managing, and it's about control. So managing becomes the primary concern, and it's about quantifying things. So in a university, for example, managerialism would uphold that there is no difference between running a university as opposed to running a mining company, because the primary concern is managing rather than the core business, which is education. So that's what the ideology of managerialism upholds. The reason why this is a problem is because, in a nutshell, managerialism will eventually kill the thing that it's trying to manage, because of that control aspect, the quantification of things, and because there's no democratic solutions to problems, there's only managerial ones. Now, in new public management, so in institutions like higher education, universities, or in hospitals, or those public services, so institutions that have a mandate to deliver public good, when we think about how managerialism manifests itself in the environment, it becomes destructive to that public good. And that's why I say it is dumb, because it actually kills the thing that it's trying to manage. And there's plenty of data out there that we've spoken about today, and that I'll present, and also in other many much research in the sector that indicate that our universities are in quite a crisis, and in many ways we've lost our way. So the big deal about the managerialised university, so why it is a big deal, is because the managerialised work ideologies that we were just talking about, controlling, quantifying, homogenising, and the themes that Amos has spoken about, go in conflict with academic ideologies. And when I say academic ideologies, I mean not just my ideologies as an academic, but in terms of academic life, which is about knowledge and inquiry and openness, and learning for public good and for human development. So managerialism goes against academic ideologies, and in our universities, what that's creating is a hybrid space where our individual identities are being challenged, because we're being we are challenged against the nature and the purpose of the universities, if that's a way to put it. Now, to break that down a little bit further, we'll look at the experience of academics. So this is based on general research, and the experience is one of overall struggle, the publish and perish, which everybody has heard about. And that's because of work intensification, because academics report feeling fear, terror and microaggressions, which obviously leads to burnout. The managerialized environment, because of the setup, which I'll talk about a little bit further, creates an individualistic environment for academics to work in. And that's because there's a lack of collaboration and collegiality. And we are subjected to a hyper performance. So our performance is hyper competitive. It's governed by numbers and audit, and things like H-index, which a Finnish colleague of mine has described as the academic ear tags, because they follow us around and they are somehow a mark of our quality of research and our quality of being an academic. So academics feel struggle overall, but professional staff are not immune to the struggle. Professional staff are viewed as inferior. And ATEM, so the Association of Tertiary Education Management, said that in their submission to the Accord just this year, have said that professional staff in higher education have a low public profile, and it's not regarded as a career path. Now, I'm very aware that I'm talking to a group of learning designers, and you would be considered to be third space professionals by the definition of Carol Graham and Natalie Varals. I hope I pronounced that right, Hank. So you would be considered third space professionals, but not every professional staff has that same experience and are not considered third space. But in the narrative in the managerialized universities, professional staff are considered to be responsible for managerialism and therefore the ailment of the universities. They're considered the accidental administrators, as in they fall into higher education by accident. They are invisible workers, and there's a prevailing them and us between academics and professional staff. But professional staff that think academics are a cross for them to bear. And that's a reflection of the conflict that exists between academics and professional staff. But also we know very well that professional staff are subject to burnout. And part of the problem that we currently have in our universities, which thank goodness for Amos, is that professional staff are highly under-researched in terms of understanding their comparative lived experiences. Now, some academics have said that that's because academics research what is important to them. So there's a ton of research around the academic experience in universities. There's much, much less around the experience of professional staff in universities. And there is certainly not a lot that compares both. And often if professional staff are collected in general well-being surveys and those sorts of things, they're lumped in with academics. But the experience of the university is really different, and the experience of the managerialised university, to be more specific, is very, very different. And I'm going to read through some comments that I have collected that hopefully might help to illuminate just what this experience that we're talking about is, and then I hope to provide some insights as to why this might be. We operate as if in a bloody Pentagon building. Everyone's got a secret number that you have to email so it can be monitored. Being academic is a very solo role. They spend a lot of time on their own. Whilst as professional staff, there is a team of us that work together. Academics are still a bit segregated in some ways. When they're on campus, academics are in their own on-campus office with the door shut, giving off the appearance of, "I'm so busy, please don't bother me." It's the professional staff that keep the culture of a faculty or a school alive. They're the ones that are celebrating a birthday, and they're always there at the farewells or the Melbourne Cup lunches. But most importantly, we need to recognise that we know, professional staff and academics together know that we have a shared purpose. And things like, and the way they demonstrate is by saying things like, we're working as a team, professionals, academics, to assist students. The students are our core purpose for being here, and we're all trying to do the same thing. So we all know in our hearts that we're here for the same reason, yet why then is this conflict, this schism of disconnect that we've talked about today, why does that perpetuate? Managerialism has effectively inserted a wall between professional staff and academic staff. And part of the reason, and they do it, managerialism does this in many ways. So for example, when, my university is not the only university to have a service hub where you put in requests for help from somebody. So an academic puts in a request and it goes into this service hub. And basically it goes into this ether where you don't know where it went. So from an, in my lived experience, from an academic perspective, I live in a dark world where I don't know how the university works because it's sat behind managerial walls that are sometimes physical, sometimes technological, sometimes virtual, sometimes structural, and sometimes cultural. Whereas as a professional staff member, I lived in a very illuminated world. I was very well networked. I worked in a team of people. I had masses of social capital, and I came to campus every day. I had a team of people around me and a broader team of professional staff around me from that, and I knew who did what. So when the requests came in, I knew why they might be delayed. I knew that Mary was on holidays. I knew that the general routing of that inquiry was it for it to go from here to here to here to here. So I understood where time delays came in, and if there were time delays, I knew who to go and talk to perhaps unblock those blockages. But as an academic, all I see is a black screen because I have a wall of technology in front of me. Or one of the pieces of narrative that came to me that I collected was an academic saying, I can't even go to their offices anymore because they all sit behind a key swiped door. So I cannot even physically go to their office because of the professional staff are sat in a centralized area all together, working all together. And as an academic, I can't access them. Or another example might be the shared inbox. So in a shared inbox, I email a name of a department. Often I don't even know who's in that department. Often I don't know who's answering that email. I don't even have a human's name. So those sorts of structural aspects that managerialism has inserted into our university are some of the reasons why there's this ongoing conflict, because there's a general confusion as to, as an academic, I don't know how the place works. I can't get things done. And for me, that can be terrifying and frustrating, particularly when I'm trying to deal with all of the many, it's like work through many cuts. Everything's a little job, seems a little job, but it's very, very hard to get done because I don't know how the systems work. I don't know how the university operates, because effectively as an academic, I'm shut out of that administrative function of the university. Whereas as a professional staff member, my world is illuminated, and so I can easily get things done. I know who to email. I know who to talk to. I know how the administration works. I know who sits behind that shared inbox. So when we're talking about this wall that managerialism has inserted between us, that's between academic and professional staff, that's one of the main drivers as to why the conflict continues, and as to why the answer is simply not, well, we just need to get on together better. Because in academics and professional staff didn't inherently come into a higher education institution to have conflict with each other. The conflict is driven by this structuring structure of managerialism. Now, to move on, the next point is, before you say, well, but what can we do about that? I mean, that's just how it is, right? That's just how the university works. And to a large extent, that is how the university works. And for a large extent, the people who are probably sitting in this room have varied ability to influence how managerialism works, and therefore how our collective experience of work manifests itself. But if we contrast managerialism with collegiality, so collegialism, when we think about the fact that managerialism is a centralized control and collegialism is a decentralized autonomy, one of the comments that came through in the chat I saw was, the very first one was, does the academic have an ongoing relationship with the learning designer? In a centralized environment, the answer to that potentially is no, because each project is new. Or when I need assistance to set up a quiz in my study desk because I've forgotten how to do it because I, did it only, 2 years ago and now I've forgotten, I can't call Mary. I have to email a shared inbox. So the answer potentially is no. There isn't a building of rapport because of this separating, and it's a physical separation in some instances. When we think about efficiency and productivity as opposed to quality, so quality is a collegial value, whereas managerialism wants efficiency because it wants to quantify. Managerialism is about individual performance, and accountability. So H-index as an academic ear tag, as I said before, as opposed to collegiality that looks at collectivism. Managerialism is a hierarchy. Collegiality exists in a flat structure. And also managerialism favours innovation in terms, so as to drive student profit, which comes down to commercialisation and marketisation of education, which is anti-university, it's anti-academic ideology, whereas collegiality looks at endurability so as to become resilient to change for the sake of change. Now, the reason I'm contrasting both of these two concepts here is that my experience of being a professional staff member, or my reflection back upon my time as a professional staff member, was that there was things that I could have done that would have fostered collegiality and rather than managerialism. So whilst no, I probably could not change the hierarchical structure of the university, what I could do is decide where my team sat. And I could have learning designers sitting in different schools, building rapport with the academics that they were working with. I did have the ability to be able to introduce a shared inbox and demand that the academics all email the teams that I looked after through a shared inbox, because that was more efficient. But in actual fact, did that actually destroy collegiality? Today, we all have a choice to switch our cameras on when a colleague rings us in Teams or on Zoom. We can choose to switch our cameras on so we can see the colleague that we're talking to, or we can choose to keep our cameras off. So these are little tiny choices that we can make each day that can foster collegiality, as opposed to the managerialism, which is so destructive in our universities. And I realize that I've rushed through that in some ways because I am looking at the time, and I did want to leave some time for any questions that anybody may have.
Thanks, Anita. That didn't feel rushed. You did very well. Thank you very much, and very interesting. There were a couple of questions. A little while ago, Colin asked, is there a spectrum of managerialism, or is it a binary? Which I thought was a good question.
I believe that there is a spectrum of it. There are some managerial actions that potentially have much bigger impact than other managerial actions. For example, using a shared inbox may seem a fairly small action as opposed to the restructuring of a university, just as Victoria University is going to experience. I think 300 staff were slated to go in today's future campus. So there are big managerial moves and there are small managerial moves. From my perspective, whilst the sector battles the big managerial moves, right on the ground level here, we all have the ability to impact those small managerial moves, like putting your name on that shared email back, rather than sending an email that says from the assessments team, who's not a human. So we have small impacts that we can enact, I think.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? If anyone wants to unmute and ask a question. No, I'll ask a question of Amos, which was asked earlier, which is about the relationships between learning designers and academics. Did you get a sense that that there was a difference if learning designers had ongoing relationships with academics?
Yeah. Regarding the question, I think there's this sense of teaching academics needing the support of learning designers to support them in the designing of their units, while at the same time they also want to have a certain degree of autonomy in terms of what kind of learning technologies should be used for that is suitable for their particular pedagogical approach. So, but I think that the important thing is that both participant groups, they are there to improve the student learning experience, and there needs to be structures in place for more collaboration to take place. So that's why I think I mentioned earlier on that learning designers being attached to specific faculties could be beneficial as compared to what some teaching academics mentioned, that there is a gradual shift towards a centralized form of support services, and them not getting the kind of personalized support from learning designers that they used to get.
All right. I'm looking at the clock and it's 2 minutes to 1. So I think we will have to leave it here. There's been lots of very interesting discussion in the chat, and please keep chatting in the in the TELedvisors team site as well. Yes, can we please thank both Amos and Anita for a great webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.